The sun burns high above the tropics, but its power is an illusion. It throws golden spears down to the surface of the water, piercing the blue in long, fading shafts of light. But down here, the light doesn't warm. It merely exposes. This is the open ocean, a vast, borderless cathedral of water where there is nowhere to hide, nowhere to burrow, and nowhere to rest. Silence reigns in this blue void. It is a heavy, oppressive quiet, broken only by the microscopic crackle of distant shrimp or the rushing tide. To the untrained eye, this is serenity, a peaceful, empty expanse. But the open ocean is never empty, and it is never at peace. Near the surface, a massive school of mullet fish hangs in the water column, thousands of silver bodies, moving as a single nervous organism. They twitch, they dart. Their silver scales catch the sunlight like scattered coins flipping in the current. They are waiting. They don't know what for, but the instinct woven into their DNA tells them that in the open blue, death can come from any direction, above, below, from the blinding glare of the sun. Then the water pressure shifts. It isn't chaotic thrashing. It isn't the frantic, explosive surge of a shark driven by the smell of blood. It is a pulse, a deliberate, calculated displacement of water. From the hazy blue distance, shapes begin to materialize. They do not arrive with splashing or frenzy. They arrive with terrifying, synchronized perfection. Bottlenose dolphins. Their bodies are hydrodynamically flawless, carved by millions of years of evolutionary pressure into living torpedoes. As they glide into view, their dorsal fins slice through the water in perfect arcs. There is no panic in their approach. There is only structure. This is not a feeding frenzy. This is a highly coordinated military operation. Every single member of the pod knows exactly where they are supposed to be. One peels off to the left, taking the wide flank. Another dives deep, disappearing beneath the silver cloud of prey to cut off the downward escape route. And somewhere in the center of this tightening web, the sound begins. It starts as a faint rhythm. Click, click, click. These are not the playful squeaks or whistles of captive performers. These are biological sonar pings. They are weapons. The dolphins are firing short, intense bursts of high-frequency sound directly into the blue water ahead of them. As these sound waves travel, they strike the school of mullet and bounce back. But what the dolphin receives is not just an echo. It is a hyper-detailed, three-dimensional, real-time map of the world. Dolphins do not merely see with sound. They perceive the density of the fish. They perceive the speed, the trajectory, the exact distance. Their echolocation is so profoundly advanced that it is akin to having MRI vision. They can bounce a sound wave off a fish and detect the flutter of its gills. They can ping a crab buried under the sand and sense the hollow airspace inside its shell. They are hunting in a realm of total sensory dominance, possessing eyes that do not require light. The mechanics behind this acoustic warfare are staggering. On the forehead of every dolphin sits a bulbous organ called the melon. It acts as an acoustic lens. It takes the sound generated within the dolphin's nasal passages, focuses it, and projects it forward like an underwater flashlight made of pure acoustic energy. When the echoes return, they aren't caught by the ears. They are received by specialized, fat-filled channels located in the dolphin's lower jawbone. These channels carry the vibration directly to the inner ear and instantly to the brain. And the brain that processes this incoming data is one of the most formidable engines of intelligence on planet Earth. Dolphins possess a brain-to-body mass ratio that rivals our own. Their neocortex, the region of the brain responsible for higher-level thinking, complex problem-solving, and emotional intelligence, is incredibly vast and elaborately folded. This folding creates massive surface area, allowing for processing speeds that leave other predators in the dust. They aren't just reacting to stimuli. They are thinking. They are calculating. And crucially, they are not doing it alone. This vast intelligence is entirely forged within the pod. A dolphin pod is not merely a herd of animals traveling together for safety. It is a complex society. It is a network of shifting alliances, multi-generational memories, and shared knowledge. Within this group of dozens of individuals, they remember old friends. They hold grudges against old rivals, and they pass down traditions. This is an instinct. It is a marine equivalent of culture. In some corners of the world, mother dolphins teach their calves to tear sponges from the seafloor and wear them like protective masks over their snouts while hunting in sharp coral rubble. It is a use of tools, taught through observation, passed from mother to child. Some pods specialize in driving fish onto mudbanks, intentionally beaching themselves to snatch a meal before sliding backward into the surf. This is a level of strategic risk-taking that requires absolute trust and precise execution. Right now, in the open water, that strategy is being deployed against a mullet. The pod moves in flawless synchronicity. The flankers have corralled the fish, forcing them tighter and tighter together. The dolphin below herds them upward, trapping them against the barrier of the ocean's surface. They have formed a living, breathing net of muscle and intelligence. And then the acoustic assault shifts gears. The clicks accelerate. They become sharper, faster, condensing into high-intensity bursts of sonic pressure, aimed like a laser directly into the center of the bait ball. For the mullet, the environment dissolves into pure sensory chaos. The sound waves are so intense, so localized, that they physically disorient the fish. The sonic pressure slams into their swim bladders, disrupting their equilibrium. Their nervous systems are overwhelmed. They cannot coordinate. They cannot flee. Some researchers believe these high-powered sonar bursts literally stun the prey, paralyzing them with sound before a single tooth is bared. In the midst of this engineered panic, the final phase of the hunt begins. A dolphin torpedoes forward from the formation. It doesn't swim, it rockets. Its jaws snap open, conical teeth flashing in the fractured sunlight, and it snatches a stunned mullet straight out of the water column. There is no chewing. There is no tearing. The fish is swallowed whole in a fraction of a second, and the dolphin immediately banks hard, carving a tight loop to seamlessly re-enter the formation. Another dolphin strikes. Then another. It is a rotating wheel of precision violence. The commotion does not go unnoticed. Above the surface, seabirds scream, spiraling down from the sky to crash into the water, stealing the fish that have been pushed too close to the air. And below, lurking in the colder, darker depths just beneath the hunt, the ocean's more ancient killers wait. Sharks. They circle the periphery, drawn by the vibrations of struggling fish and the scent of fear. They watch the frenzy, but they do not charge. A lone shark, no matter its size, knows better than to break the line of a dolphin pod. Because while dolphins are celebrated as the smiling acrobats of the sea, they are in reality heavily armed, fiercely protective, and deeply brutal when provoked. If a shark makes a mistake of threatening a calf or attempting to steal from the hunt, the pod will not scatter. They will organize. They will turn their supreme speed and intelligence against the intruder. A group of dolphins will isolate a shark, accelerating to ramming speed. They use their dense, hard snouts like biological battering rams, striking the shark with bone-shattering force. But they don't strike randomly. Their echolocation allows them to see the shark's internal anatomy. They target the soft, vulnerable underbelly. They target the gills. They strike the rupture to suffocate, to kill. They are the apex weapon. Sound, speed, and society wrapped in the skin of gray rubber. As the hunt begins to slow, the dense ball of mullet is decimated. Only a few scattered survivors dart away into the endless blue. The dolphins regroup. A few break the surface, leaping into the air, twisting in a display that might be communication, might be a reset of their physical positioning, or might simply be the pure exuberance of a successful kill. But to view them only as majestic hunters is to miss the terrifying depth of their psychology, because their supreme intelligence comes with a darker spectrum of behavior. They are not bound by simple survival instincts. They possess enough cognitive surplus to engage in malice, in deception, in politics. In the wild, male alliances will ruthlessly harass and isolate females for weeks at a time. Rival pods will engage in violent, territorial skirmishes. They are capable of deceit. They are capable of complex problem-solving that borders on the Machiavellian. They don't stalk from the shadows like the cold, instinct-driven ambush predators of the reef. They don't overwhelm with mindless, blood-fueled frenzies. They conquer their environment through sheer, dominating awareness. They use memory. They use positioning. They use each other. As the pod begins to drift away, descending back into the deeper, cooler water, the ocean behind them returns to its illusion of peace. The silver scales of the consumed fish drift downward like snow. The water stops churning. The barrage of clicks and whistles fades into the background noise of the sea. But the silence they leave behind is heavy. It is the echo of an extraordinary predator, a creature that proves that in the vast, unforgiving theater of the ocean, the ultimate weapon is not the strength of the jaw or the thickness of the armor. The ultimate weapon is the mind, and the dolphin's mind is always pinging, always mapping, always watching the blue. Far beneath the sunlit frenzy of the surface, past the vibrant coral cities and the roaming pods of pelagic hunters, the ocean changes its fundamental nature. Down here, in the twilight zones and the abyssal plains of the continental shelf, the water is no longer a theater of speed. It is heavy. It is oppressive. The pressure is immense, a physical weight that would crush the hollow bones of terrestrial creatures in an instant. The light from above is reduced to a sickly, muted green haze, and eventually to absolute, suffocating blackness. This is a realm governed not by the frantic heartbeat of the hunt, but by the creeping, glacial pace of deep ocean time. The landscape is a barren necropolis of shifting sand dunes, jagged rock formations, and the rusting, algae-draped skeletons of sunken ships. It is a world where dead things fall from the sky. The slow, endless drift of marine snow, carcasses of whales, and the detritus of a billion surface lives settling onto the bottom of the world. And in this graveyard, nothing goes to waste. A shadow detaches itself from the rusted hull of a sunken freighter. At first, it does not even register as a living organism. It looks like a tangle of discarded industrial piping, or perhaps the bare, winter-stripped branches of a drowned tree. But then, the structure shifts. It elevates. 10 spindly, hyper-elongated limbs unfold with the grinding, mechanical deliberation of a construction crane. This is the spider crab, an arthropod of nightmarish proportions and breathtaking patience. There is nothing elegant about its movement. It does not glide. It does not swim. It walks, dragging its central carapace forward on jointed, chitinous legs that seem entirely too fragile for the immense pressure of the deep. In the case of the Japanese spider crab, the undisputed titan of this lineage, those legs can stretch an astonishing 12 feet from claw tip to claw tip, creating a sprawling, alien silhouette that commands the seafloor. Yet, despite its monstrous size, it moves with the cautious, calculating steps of a creature navigating a minefield. It is not a predator in the way the shark or the dolphin is a predator. It does not possess the speed to run down a fleeing fish, nor the venom to paralyze a struggling eel. The spider crab is an opportunist, a master archivist of decay. It is the ocean's undertaker. As it ambles across the silt, leaving a delicate needlepoint trail behind it, its sensory array is fully engaged. It cannot rely on vision in the gloom of the deep shelf. Instead, the crab experiences the world through chemistry. Its legs and antennae are covered in thousands of microscopic, highly sensitive setae, tiny hairs that taste the water. It is sniffing for the molecular signature of death, a decaying fish, a shattered clam, a sea star succumbing to disease. The spider crab reads these invisible chemical trails like a map, following the fading scent of rotting proteins across miles of barren sand. When it finally locates its prize, perhaps a mangled remains of squid dropped by a predator higher in the water column, the crab does not attack it. It dismantles it. The 2 front limbs of the spider crab end in specialized pincers. They are not the massive, crushing mouths of the lobster. They are precision instruments. Like a watchmaker dissecting a delicate mechanism, the spider crab uses these slender claws to pick, peel, and slice. It strips the rotting flesh from bone and cartilage, feeding itself in slow, methodical motions. There is no urgency. Down here, competition is sparse, and energy is a currency to be hoarded, never spent frivolously. It will sit over a single carcass for days, meticulously cleaning the bones until they are white and bare, returning the trapped calcium and nutrients back into the cycle of the deep. But even an undertaker must hide. Despite its armored shell, the spider crab is not invincible. To bottom-dwelling sharks, massive stingrays, and giant octopuses, the crab is a slow-moving feast of nutrient-dense meat encased in a brittle wrapper. To survive, the spider crab has mastered a form of defense that borders on biological artistry. living camouflage. The carapace of the spider crab is not smooth. It is covered in tiny Velcro-like hooks and coarse bristles. These are not an accident of anatomy. They are a canvas. As the crab wanders the seafloor, it acts as a bizarre gardener. When it encounters a piece of sponge, a vibrant sea anemone, or a cluster of foul-tasting algae, it does not simply eat it. It reaches out with precise pincers, snips a perfectly sized fragment, and carries it to its own mouth. But instead of swallowing, the crab chews the base of the organism to soften it, creating a biological glue. Then, when eerie contortionists reach, it plants the living organism directly onto its own back, hooking it securely into its bristles. Over time, the spider crab transforms itself into a walking coral reef. Its true shape is completely obliterated beneath a thriving garden of toxic sponges and stinging anemones. To a cruising predator, the crab ceases to exist. It is just another lump of algae-covered rock on a seafloor made of millions of algae-covered rocks. The crab essentially weaponizes a landscape, wearing the toxic and the unappetizing as a cloak of invisibility. It can sit motionless in an ambush stance for hours, practically invisible, waiting for a careless, bottom-dwelling fish to drift just an inch too close before its long, spindly claws snap shut like a bear trap. Yet, for all its armor and all its camouflage, there's a fundamental flaw in the spider crab's design. A terrifying biological toll it must pay for its survival. The crab skeleton is on the outside. It is a rigid vault of calcium carbonate, and while it protects the soft organs within, it does not grow. In order to expand, in order to heal, the spider crab must undergo one of the most agonizing and vulnerable processes in the animal kingdom, the molt. When the time comes, the crab's internal chemistry shifts. It begins to absorb seawater, deliberately swelling its soft tissues until the pressure inside its own shell becomes unbearable. Slowly, agonizingly, a seam splits open along the back of the carapace. What follows is a claustrophobic nightmare of extraction. The crab must pull its entire body, including the massive, multi-jointed lengths of all 10 legs, its eyes, its antennae, and even the lining of its stomach, out through that single narrow crack. It is a process that can take grueling, exhausting hours. One wrong move, one limb that gets stuck in the old shell, can mean a slow, trapped death. When it finally slips free, it is a ghost of its former self. The new shell is completely soft, rubbery, and utterly defenseless. The crab cannot walk. Its legs will not support its weight. It cannot fight. It cannot pinch. It is a massive, quivering mass of raw protein sitting exposed in the dark. For days, it must hide deep within a crevice or beneath a wreck, waiting for the ocean's calcium to harden its new armor. Countless spider crabs do not survive this window of vulnerability. They are sniffed out, dragged from the dark, and consumed. But evolution is not without its dramatic countermeasures. To survive this perilous phase, certain species of spider crabs execute a survival strategy that turns the quiet seafloor into a theater of surreal, crawling horror. As the waters cool and the season shifts, a chemical signal goes out into the dark. Deep in the bays of southern Australia and along the plunging trenches of Japan, the solitary scavengers begin to walk. They emerge from the wrecks. They crest the sand dunes. They pour out of the deep trenches by the hundreds, then by the thousands, then by the hundreds of thousands. They converge on shallow, specific plains of sand, drawn together by an ancient, unbreakable instinct. The gathering of the spider crabs is a staggering spectacle. They do not form herds, they form mountains. They climb on top of one another, stacking their chitinous bodies 10 deep, tangling their impossibly long legs until the seafloor completely vanishes beneath a writhing, rusty orange carpet of armor. This mass aggregation is a fortress of flesh and bone. They gather together to molt simultaneously. By clustering in such overwhelming numbers, they dilute the risk of predation. There is safety in the chaos, but the predators know they are coming. Massive, smooth stingrays, the size of dining tables, glide over the crab mountains like dark storm clouds. They dive into the pile, using their crushing jaws to crunch through the soft, newly molted crabs that have not yet managed to bury themselves deep enough in the pile. Giant octopuses slither through the chaotic tangle of legs, snatching the weak. It is a war of attrition. The ocean demands a sacrifice, and the crabs pay it. Yet, the vast majority survive. The new shells harden. The mountain begins to dissolve. And one by one, the armored walkers disperse back into the gloom, returning to their solitary patrol of the deep. They will outlive the fast. They will outlast the furious. While the apex predators of the sunlit world burn out in bursts of speed and high metabolism violence, the spider crab plays the long game. Some of these titans will roam the dark for half a century, perhaps even 100 years. They will witness the wrecks of human engineering slowly dissolve into dust. They will weather the shifting currents and the suffocating pressures. There is no glory in the life of the spider crab. There are no cinematic chases, no triumphant roars, no dazzling displays of speed. There is only the slow, unending march across the bottom of the world. They are the silent curators of the abyss, armed with patience, clothed in decay, and marching to the slow, immortal rhythm of the deep. The tropical reef is an engine of perpetual motion. It is a metropolis built on the razor's edge of starvation and predation, where survival is usually dictated by a single, unforgiving metric: speed. The water here is clear, the light is blinding, and the rules are brutally simple. If you are soft, you must hide. If you are exposed, you must run. If you can do neither, you will be consumed. Yet, drifting through the sun-dappled shallows, hovering just inches above the crushed coral substrate, is a creature that seems to defy every evolutionary law of this high-stakes arena. It does not dart. It does not sprint. It possesses no armor plates, no venomous stingers on its tail, and no camouflage to melt into the background. It is round, awkward, and propelled by small, almost comical fluttering fins. It moves with the sluggish, unhurried glide of a miniature dirigible. It is the puffer fish. And in an ecosystem composed of biological torpedoes and silent assassins, it looks like nothing more than a soft, floating meal, a vulnerable, gelatinous afterthought. But the ocean does not tolerate mistakes. If the puffer fish is here, meandering openly through the domain of sharks and barracudas, it is not because it is lucky. It is because it is holding a terrible, invisible hand. It is a master of the high-stakes bluff, relying on a survival strategy that is part mechanical nightmare, part chemical warfare, and entirely reliant on psychological manipulation. The water pressure in the lagoon suddenly shifts. It is a microscopic change, entirely invisible to the human eye, but the puffer fish feels it instantly. Running along its flanks is a lateral line, a highly sensitive, fluid-filled network of neuromass that act as a biological seismograph. It detects the rhythmic, muscular sweep of a tail. A predator is closing in. A juvenile reef shark glides over the coral lip, its eyes locking onto the slow-moving anomaly. The shark banks, its pectoral fins angling downward, accelerating into an attack vector. For the puffer fish, the calculus of survival is absolute. It cannot outswim the shark. Its top speed is a pathetic, wobbling retreat that would only trigger the predator's chase instinct. It cannot squeeze into a crevice. Its body is too rigid, its bones strangely fused. So, it does the exact opposite of fleeing. It stops, and it fundamentally alters reality. The puffer fish opens its mouth and begins to gulp water. It does not swallow this water into its digestive tract. It pumps it violently into a highly specialized, intensely elastic stomach cavity. The physiological engineering required for this act is staggering. Its spine is uniquely curved to accommodate the expansion. Its skin is utterly devoid of scales, pleated and folded like an accordion, waiting for this exact moment. In a matter of seconds, the small, vulnerable fish forcefully inhales the ocean, multiplying its body mass. It swells grotesquely, morphing from a sluggish swimmer into a rigid, perfectly spherical balloon. But this inflation reveals a hidden architecture. As the skin stretches to its absolute limit, hundreds of sharp, needle-like spines, modified scales that lay flat and hidden moments before, snap upright, locking into place. The shark arrives, jaws snapping open, expecting the soft yield of flesh. Instead, it is confronted with an unswallowable geometry. The prey it targeted has vanished, replaced by a tense, spiky sphere that no longer fits within the diameter of its jaws. The physical barrier is absolute. To bite down is to drive dozens of spines deep into the soft, sensitive tissues of the shark's mouth and gills. The predator aborts the strike, thrashing its head in confusion, banking violently away from the bizarre, floating mine. The physical transformation is a masterpiece of mechanical deterrence, but it is only the first layer of the pufferfish's defense. The spines and the size are merely the warning label on a much darker package. Because if the predator is large enough or desperate enough or reckless enough to actually force its jaws around an inflated puffer and swallow it, it will never hunt again. Lurking microscopically within the liver, the ovaries, the intestines, and even sweating to the skin of the pufferfish is one of the most potent, devastating biological weapons ever discovered: tetrodotoxin. This neurotoxin is a masterclass in biochemical sabotage. It is up to 1,200 times more lethal than cyanide. A single, average-sized pufferfish contains enough of this compound to kill 30 adult humans, and the mechanism of death is chillingly precise. Tetrodotoxin does not destroy tissue. It simply turns off the nervous system. It acts as a molecular cork, physically plugging the sodium channels in nerve cell membranes. The moment this happens, the brain can no longer speak to the body. Voluntary movement ceases. The muscles of the diaphragm freeze. The predator remains entirely conscious, its mind trapped in a rapidly suffocating cage of flesh. As its respiratory system completely shuts down, there is no known antidote. The supreme irony of this weapon is that the pufferfish does not even manufacture it. It is entirely immune to the poison, but outsources the production to symbiotic bacteria that it accumulates through its diet, storing the lethal payload within its own organs. It is a walking biological dirty bomb. And yet, this ultimate defense is a paradox. If the toxin is used, the pufferfish still dies, crushed in the jaws of the predator. The poison is a vengeance weapon, ensuring that the predator who makes a mistake of eating a pufferfish will never pass its genes to the next generation. It is evolutionary conditioning. The reef learns, to the agonizing deaths of its hunters, that the slow, spiky sphere is not food. It is a death sentence. But this defense is not without a heavy, agonizing cost to the puffer itself. Inflation is not a superpower deployed casually. It is a desperate, physiologically traumatizing event. When the pufferfish is fully inflated, it is functionally helpless. It loses all ability to steer or swim. It becomes a buoyant, tense hostage to the ocean's currents, rolling uncontrollably toward the surface or tumbling across the sharp coral. Its internal organs are crushed against its spine by the massively expanded stomach. Its breathing becomes labored, its gills struggling to extract oxygen under the immense internal pressure. It is a state of biological emergency. As the shadow of the shark fades into blue, the pufferfish begins a slow, exhausting process of deflation. It forcefully belches the trapped water back into the sea, its body shrinking, its skin wrinkling, the spines folding back down into their hidden sheaths. It is left drained, vulnerable, and exhausted, heavily panting as it sinks back toward the safety of the substrate. It is a defense mechanism that flirts with self-destruction. When it is not fighting for its life, the pufferfish returns to the quiet, methodical business of survival, revealing a completely different set of biological marvels. It is a predator in its own right, though it hunts creatures of stone and shell. Its diet consists of crabs, sea urchins, and heavy mollusks, animals heavily armored against the rest of the reef. To conquer them, the pufferfish possesses a terrifying piece of cranial hardware. Its jaw is a hydraulic press. Its foreteeth are completely fused together, forming a solid, parrot-like beak driven by massively over-engineered jaw muscles. It approaches a conch shell, locks its jaws over the thick calcium carbonate, and bites down. The shell shatters like glass. But this incredible biting force is a biological necessity, a treadmill of survival for which the pufferfish can never step off. Its fused teeth never stop growing. If it stops hunting hard-shelled prey, if it stops grinding its beak against stone and bone, the teeth will overgrow, eventually fusing its mouth shut and condemning it to starvation. It must crush to live. And then there is the final, most jarring contradiction of the pufferfish. This clumsy, toxic, heavily armored creature is also capable of profound, meticulous artistry. In certain species, when the mating season arrives, the male does not fight for dominance. He does not rely on his lethal chemistry. Instead, he descends to a flat expanse of sand and begins to work. For days, he swims in tight, exhaustive patterns, dragging his fins to the silt, moving shell fragments and coral rubble with his beak. He is building something. Viewed from above, the result is breathtaking. It is a perfectly symmetrical, deeply complex geometric pattern carved into the seafloor, resembling an underwater crop circle up to 6 feet in diameter. It is an altar of mathematics and effort, adorned with carefully placed shells. He builds his masterpiece for a single purpose: to guide the ocean currents, directing fine sand particles away from the center, creating a perfect, calm nursery. If a female deems his architecture flawless, she will lay her eggs in the center. If not, the current will wash his days of exhausted labor away, and he will start again. This is the duality of the puffer fish. It is an artist that paints in the sand, and an assassin that carries the power to stop a beating heart. It exists in the deadly, unforgiving theater of the reef, not by competing in the endless arms race of speed and strength, but by stepping outside of it entirely. It survives through the absolute audacity of the bluff. It looks its executioners in the eye, swells to an impossible size, and dares them to take a bite. In a world of apex predators and relentless pursuit, the puffer fish proves that sometimes the most effective way to win the war is to make your enemy realize that the victory will cost them absolutely everything. The turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea hold a certain kind of magic. Beneath the rolling, sun-baked waves lies a sprawling, calcified metropolis, the coral reef. It is a biological fortress, built over millennia by billions of tiny architects, rising from the seafloor in magnificent spires of branching elkhorn, bulbous brain corals, and labyrinthine grottos tangled with anemones. This is a world defined by frantic, unrelenting energy. It is a chaotic marketplace of survival. Parrotfish grind their heavy beaks against algae-covered stone, sending clouds of white sand into the current. Damselfish fiercely aggressively defend their tiny, invisible territories, darting like sparks of blue electricity. Moray eels weave blindly through the dark crevices, and reef sharks patrol the perimeter in a state of constant, muscular tension. Everything here is moving. Everything is watching. Survival in this crowded city relies on recognizing the ancient, universal signals of danger: speed, teeth, and sudden movement. But what happens to a fortress when the enemy doesn't look like an enemy? What happens when an invader wears a crown of feathers, moves with the grace of a falling leaf, and broadcasts a warning that no one in this ocean has evolved to understand? Drifting through the shadows of a coral overhang, moving so slowly it barely registers as a living animal, is a phantom. It does not swim. It hovers. Its body is draped in a spectacular, mesmerizing pattern of vertical maroon, white, and reddish-brown stripes. Pectoral fins, long and delicate, fan outward like the ornate silk fans of a royal court, swaying gently with the microscopic rhythm of the tide. It looks ornamental. It looks like a fragile, drifting piece of living art, lost among the violent, practical shapes of the reef. It is the lionfish. And beneath its breathtaking, theatrical elegance lies one of the most devastatingly perfect killing machines the ocean has ever engineered. To understand the terror of the lionfish, one must first understand the chilling psychology of its hunt. The lionfish does not stalk its prey from the shadows, nor does it engage in explosive, high-speed chases typical of barracudas or jacks. It simply floats into the open. It hunts in plain sight, most often in the dim, transitional light of dawn and dusk. As it approaches a cluster of juvenile wrasses hovering near a coral head, the lionfish extends its massive, striped pectoral fins. It uses them not for propulsion, but as a visual wall. It slowly, imperceptibly herds a small fish, cornering them against a reef structure. The juvenile fish are confused. Their DNA is encoded with millions of years of survival software, telling them to flee from the sleek, fast-moving shapes of native predators. But the lionfish breaks that code. To the native Caribbean fish, this floating, striped apparition does not register as a threat. It looks like a piece of drifting seaweed. It looks harmless. So, the tiny fish make a fatal miscalculation. They do not scatter. They freeze. They hold their ground, waiting for the strange drifting object to pass. And then the illusion shatters. The strike of a lionfish is a feat of explosive, localized physics. It happens in less than 1/10 of a single second, faster than the human eye can process, faster than the prey's nervous system can even register the need to escape. The lionfish violently flares its gills and drops its jaw. expanding its mouth cavity so rapidly that it creates an instantaneous, localized pressure vacuum in water. There is no bite. There is no struggle. The water simply collapses inward, and the prey is inhaled, ripped from its position, and sucked deep into the lionfish's gaping maw. The jaws snap shut. The entire violent event is completely silent, and the lionfish's capacity for slaughter is seemingly boundless. Its stomach is incredibly elastic, capable of expanding to up to 30 times its normal volume. A single lionfish can gorge itself on prey up to half its own body length, inhaling dozens of vital reef fish in a single slow-motion patrol. But a predator this ravenous, floating this slowly in the open water, should logically become easy prey for the apex hunters of the reef. A slow-moving, bloated fish should be an effortless snack for a passing grouper or a hungry reef shark. Yet, as the lionfish drift away from the massacre, a large Caribbean reef shark turns its cold, unblinking eye toward it. The shark closes a distance, testing the water, sensing the vibrations of the slow-moving creature. But as it nears, the lionfish does not attempt to flee. It merely dips its head downward, angling its back toward the approaching predator. Rising majestically from its dorsal ridge are 13 towering hypodermic spines. They bristle, fanning out into an impenetrable defensive phalanx. This is the armor of an emperor, and it is laced with a biochemical nightmare. The spines themselves do not inject a lethal, heart-stopping neurotoxin like the pufferfish or the sea snake. The venom of the lionfish is designed for something much more insidious: pure, unadulterated agony. Stored in deep glandular grooves along the length of each spine is a complex cocktail of neuromuscular toxins and acetylcholine. It is a defense mechanism built not to kill, but to permanently traumatize. If a predator makes a mistake of biting down, the pressure forces the venom up through the grooves and deep into the flesh. The effect is instantaneous. The venom causes profound, searing pain that can last for days, accompanied by massive localized swelling, tissue necrosis, and in some cases, systemic shock, nausea, and respiratory distress. The shark, hovering mere inches from the bristling spines, pauses. It does not recognize the maroon and white stripes. It has no evolutionary memory of this creature, but the universal language of those sharp, raised spears translates clearly enough. The shark banks away, swimming into the blue, leaving the slow-moving phantom completely unchallenged. In its native waters of the Indo-Pacific, the lionfish is just one player in a balanced, highly competitive biological theater. There, it evolved alongside predators that learned to navigate its defenses and prey that learned to fear its stripes. Its numbers are kept in check by a million years of ecological checks and balances. But this is not the Indo-Pacific. This is the Atlantic. Sometime in the 1980s, whether through the careless dumping of an exotic aquarium trade or the shattering of a coastal tank during a violent hurricane, a handful of lionfish were released into the waters off the coast of Florida. They found themselves entirely transported into an evolutionary paradise. They had crossed an ocean to find a world full of naive, defenseless food and completely devoid of anything that knew how to hunt them. What followed was not an integration. It was an apocalyptic conquest. Without the natural boundaries of its home, the lionfish unleashed a reproductive strategy that operates with the relentless, compounding efficiency of a biological virus. The math of their invasion is staggering. A single female lionfish does not breed once a season. She can release up to 30,000 eggs every 2 to 4 days. Millions of eggs a year. These eggs are bundled in a gelatinous mass that floats to the surface, breaking apart to release microscopic, transparent larvae. These tiny, invisible ghosts drift effortlessly on the warm, sweeping currents of the Gulf Stream. They are carried for hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, completely uncontainable, raining down on new reefs, new shipwrecks, and new coastlines. Within a few short decades, the lionfish empire expanded with terrifying speed. They swept up the eastern seaboard of the United States. They swallowed the Bahamas. They infiltrated the Gulf of Mexico, spread across the Caribbean Sea, and pushed southward along the coasts of Central and South America. They proved capable of surviving in pristine coral shallows, in murky, brackish estuaries, and at crushing depths hundreds of feet below the limits of recreational scuba divers. And wherever they settle, a silent, invisible decay begins. When a reef is colonized by lionfish, The visual impact is not immediate. The coral remains. The water remains clear. But a slow, terminal erosion begins from the inside out. The lionfish gorge themselves on the juvenile populations of wrasses, gobies, and most critically, parrotfish. These tiny grazers are the janitors of the reef. Their constant feeding keeps the aggressive, fast-growing algae from suffocating the slow-growing coral polyps. As the lionfish methodically vacuum the grazers out of existence, the balance tips, the algae blooms. It creeps over the calcium skeletons, blocking the sunlight, choking the life out of the reef. The colorful, vibrant metropolis slowly turns into a dark, suffocating graveyard of green and brown fuzz. Biodiversity plummets. The structural integrity of the reef collapses. It is an ecological coup d'etat, orchestrated entirely by a creature that never swims faster than a casual drift. Humans, realizing the magnitude of the disaster, have attempted to wage war. Across the Caribbean and the Florida coast, coastal communities organize massive lionfish derbies. Armies of scuba divers descend into blue, armed with spears and specialized containment tubes, hunting the invaders by the thousands. Chefs have learned to safely cut away the venomous spines, serving the delicate, flaky white meat in high-end restaurants, attempting to eat the problem out of existence. But it is a futile resistance. It is trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. For every 1,000 lionfish speared on a shallow reef, 1 million more are breeding in the unreachable depths, hidden in the dark, laying millions of eggs that will ride the currents of tomorrow's battleground. Evolution cannot move fast enough to teach the native fish to run. The native sharks cannot be trained to brave the venomous spears. The lionfish does not care about the spear fisherman. It does not care about the collapsing ecosystem. It simply exists, perfectly adapted, flawlessly executed, operating in a void of consequence. It drifts through the dying coral, its striped fins waving like the banners of a victorious army. It does not roar. It does not thrash or slash. It glides, cloaked in breathtaking beauty and laced with unbearable pain. Its elegance is its ultimate disguise. Its slowness is its absolute power. In the coral kingdoms of the Atlantic, the lionfish is no longer a guest. It is a ruler without rivals, a beautiful, deadly, silent conqueror, reminding us that the most devastating force in the natural world is not always the one that strikes with the hardest blow. Sometimes, it is the one that no one sees coming until the balance is already lost and the silent water is entirely its own. The tropical reef at midday is a kingdom of frantic, nervous energy. Sunlight penetrates the shallow water in dazzling, shifting geometric nets, illuminating a sprawling labyrinth of calcified spires, plunging drop-offs and branching coral arms. Everywhere you look, life is operating at maximum velocity. Schools of silver baitfish explode into synchronized, evasive shimmers at the slightest change in water pressure. Vibrant wrasses dart between crevices with a jerky, erratic movements of creatures that know they are constantly being hunted. The rule of this sun-drenched world is simple. Keep moving, keep watching, and never, ever drop your guard. But not all danger announces itself with the violent thrash of a tail or the shadowy silhouette of a shark. Within the tight, claustrophobic corridors of the reef, there is a predator that operates on a completely different frequency. It does not play by the rules of speed. It does not rely on brute force. It weaponizes silence. A subtle flicker catches the eye. It is so smooth, so fluid, it almost looks like a trick of the current. Gliding effortlessly through a narrow ravine of braying coral is a shape that simply does not belong in the kingdom of fishes. It is a long, banded ribbon of life, moving with a hypnotic, undulating grace. This is a true sea snake, and it is arguably the most perfectly designed assassin in the ocean. As it moves, its head remains perfectly steady, locked onto an invisible trail. Every few seconds, a forked tongue flicks out into the salty water, tasting the microscopic chemical residue left behind by passing prey. It is not swimming aimlessly. It is tracking. To understand the sea snake, you must first understand the incredible evolutionary compromises it has made to dominate this environment. It is a reptile. Its ancestors conquered the dry earth, developing lungs to breathe the air and scales to lock in moisture. But millions of years ago, the sea snake looked back to the ocean and returned to the water. In doing so, it became a creature of profound contradictions. It does not have the gills of a fish. It must breathe air. Yet, it moves through the aquatic world with more agility than the fish it hunts. Its body is not perfectly cylindrical like a terrestrial snake. It is laterally compressed, flattened from side to side like a ribbon. This aerodynamic, or rather, hydrodynamic profile allows it to slip through the impossibly tight, labyrinthine cracks of the coral where larger, bulkier predators could never hope to follow. Its tail has widened into a distinct, flattened paddle, providing powerful, sweeping propulsion without the chaotic splashing of fins. But its need for oxygen remains its tether to the surface world. To compensate, the sea snake has evolved an internal architecture that borders on the miraculous. Its lung is not a compact organ. It stretches almost the entire length of its serpentine body. When it breaches the surface, pushing its specialized, dorsally located nostrils just millimeters above the waterline, it takes a single massive gas of air. That one breath can sustain a dive for over an hour. Furthermore, its skin is highly permeable, capable of absorbing dissolved oxygen directly from surrounding seawater and venting toxic carbon dioxide out, effectively allowing the snake to partially breathe through its skin while submerged. It is a marine marvel wrapped in reptilian scales. Down in the shadows of the reef, the hunt is reaching its silent climax. The snake has followed the chemical scent trail to the base of a massive coral boulder. Tucked deep within a dark, narrow crevice, a juvenile moray eel thinks it is safe. The eel is heavily muscled, armed with glass-like teeth, and perfectly concealed. A shark could not reach it. A grouper cannot suck it out. But the sea snake simply pours its liquid body into the opening. It slithers into the dark, closing the distance to the eel. And then it stops. It freezes, hovering just a few inches away. It does not coil tightly for a massive, crushing strike. It simply waits, perfectly aligned, the tongue flicking once, twice. When the lunge comes, it is breathtaking in its economy of motion. There is no epic struggle. There is no violent thrashing that kicks up clouds of sand. The snake darts forward, its jaws opening just wide enough to sink two small, hollow fangs into the soft flesh of the eel. The bite lasts only a fraction of a second. Then, the snake immediately withdraws, pulling its head back out of striking range. It does not wrap around the eel to constrict it. It does not hold on to wrestle its prey to death. It simply retreats to a safe distance, hovers in the water, and waits, because the sea snake does not need to fight. It possesses a biochemical weapon so overwhelmingly powerful that a physical struggle is entirely unnecessary. The venom injected into the eel is a highly complex, devastatingly pure neurotoxin. Drop for drop, the venom of certain sea snakes, like the Belcher sea snake, is significantly more toxic than almost any venomous land snake on the planet, including the king cobra or the inland taipan. The venom races through the eel's bloodstream, immediately seeking out the nervous system. It acts as a catastrophic chemical override. It binds to the neural receptors, instantly severing the communication lines between the brain and the muscles. Within seconds, the eel begins to twitch. Its jaws lock open. The muscular undulations that allow it to swim completely cease. Finally, the venom hits the respiratory system, paralyzing the mechanisms of breath. The struggle is over almost before it began. It is a silent, invisible shutting down of life. Only when the eel is completely motionless, paralyzed and dead in the dark, does the snake return. It unhinges its jaw and slowly, methodically swallows the prey whole, letting the powerful digestive acids of its elongated stomach do the rest. This terrifying efficiency makes the sea snake a master of the reef, but also paints a target on its back. In an ocean filled with massive, opportunistic predators, a slender, soft-bodied reptile would normally be an easy, high-protein snack for a cruising tiger shark or a plunging sea eagle. Yet, the sea snake does not try to hide. Many of the 60-plus species of true sea snakes are draped in vibrant, high-contrast patterns. Bold bands of stark black and white, deep blues cut with startling yellows. In the animal kingdom, this is known as aposematism. It is nature's most aggressive advertising campaign. These colors are not camouflage. They are a glaring, high-visibility billboard that broadcasts a single lethal message, Asterisk, I am not hiding from you. Touch me, and you will die. Asterisk, it is a warning that the ocean respects. Most sharks will actively veer away from a banded sea snake. Groupers will let them pass unbothered. The bold colors buy them an incredible immunity, allowing them to glide through the deadliest waters on Earth with the quiet confidence of an apex killer. But there is a profound, almost tragic irony to the sea snake's deadly reputation. For all its terrifying toxicity, for all its biochemical firepower, it is one of the most gentle, reluctant killers in the sea. Unlike the highly aggressive vipers of the terrestrial jungles or the territorial predators of the reef, the sea snake has zero interest in conflict. It does not defend territory. It does not strike out of spite. Its venom is a precious, metabolically expensive resource designed exclusively for securing food, not for settling scores. Human divers swimming through the Indo-Pacific frequently encounter them. The snakes are inherently curious. They will often approach a diver, flicking their tongues against the neoprene of a wetsuit, tasting the strange, bubbling creature in their territory. If the diver remains calm, the snake will simply investigate and glide away. The vast majority of human fatalities occur only when fishermen drag them up in heavy trawling nets, terrifying and crushing the animals until they lash out in blind, defensive panic. When left alone, they are the pacifists of the venomous world. They are also the great wanderers of the ocean. While a reef shark might spend its entire life patrolling a single coral atoll, sea snakes are not bound by geography. When the powerful tidal currents rip through the coral passages, channeling immense volumes of water out into the open blue, the snakes surrender to the flow. They ride the deep-sea highways, drifting for hundreds of kilometers across the open ocean, navigating between the remote archipelagos of Indonesia, the Philippines, and the Great Barrier Reef. They have been found alone, far out in the pelagic void, curled around floating logs or drifting mats of seaweed, resting before continuing their endless maritime migration. But this nomadic existence ties their fate directly to the health of the entire global ocean. As climate change rapidly warms the tropical seas, the currents that the snakes rely on are shifting. The coral reefs they use for hunting grounds are bleaching, turning into sterile white boneyards devoid of the small fish and eels they need to survive. Agricultural runoff and sediment choke the coastal estuaries, blurring the clear water and disrupting the fragile food webs that support them. Despite their lethal adaptations, they cannot bite their way out of a collapsing ecosystem. If the reef dies, the silent assassin has nowhere left to hide and nothing left to hunt. Yet, for now, they endure. They remain a constant, mesmerizing presence in the shallow seas. A reminder that ultimate power in the natural world does not always roar. It does not always tear through the water with rows of jagged teeth or the sheer, crushing mass of a giant. Sometimes the most absolute, terrifying power in the ocean is a quiet, banded ribbon of life, tasting the water, slipping to the shadows, and killing with a whisper. In a loud, chaotic ocean, the sea snake commands ultimate respect through the simple, terrifying mastery of control. Beneath the churning, slate-gray surface of the North Atlantic, the ocean sheds the vibrant, sunlit chaos of the tropical reefs. As the water deepens, the light fractures and fades, consumed by a heavy, muted green. The temperature plummets. The currents do not dance here. They push, relentlessly dragging across a shadowed battlefield of jagged boulders, dense forests of kelp, shifting sand, and the rotting timber of forgotten wrecks. This is an unforgiving frontier, a place where survival hinges not on the explosive speed of a silver baitfish, nor the venomous grace of a tropical assassin. Here, in the freezing dark, survival is measured in inches. It is measured in endurance. It is measured in armor. Among the cracks and deep-sea trenches, something begins to stir. Its approach is not swift. It does not glide or dart. It lumbers. A deep, mottled crimson form emerges in the shadows of a rocky overhang, moving with a deliberate mechanical crawl. Its long, whip-like antennae sweep back and forth in the gloom, acting as blind scouts sweeping a hostile perimeter. 8 jointed walking legs tick rhythmically along the gravel, kicking up microscopic clouds of silt. This is Homerus americanus, the American lobster. To the casual observer, to the surface world, this creature is little more than a symbol of culinary luxury, a dinner plate icon served steaming with drawn butter. But to view the lobster through the lens of human appetite is to completely misunderstand one of the most perfectly engineered survivors in the history of the ocean. This creature is not a delicacy. It is a veteran of a brutal, unending benthic trench war. The body of the lobster is a walking fortress. It is encased entirely in a rigid, heavy exoskeleton built of chitin and heavily reinforced with calcified plates of calcium carbonate. Every movement it makes is jointed, robotic, and deliberate. In a vertebrate body, muscles pull against the outside of an internal skeleton, but the lobster lives completely enclosed within its bones. Its muscles contract against the inside of its armor. It is a biological tank, sealed off in the teeth and jaws of a hostile world. But this supreme protection comes with a terrifying, paradoxical cost. The armor that keeps the lobster alive is also a prison. Because the exoskeleton is composed of dead, rigid material, it does not grow. In order to increase in size, in order to heal, the lobster must undergo an agonizing process called molting. It is, without question, one of the most profoundly dangerous and vulnerable events in the animal kingdom. When the internal pressure of its growing tissue becomes unbearable, the lobster secretes enzymes to separate its flesh from the inside of its shell. It absorbs seawater, swelling its body until, finally, the heavy carapace splits straight down the back. What happens next is an act of excruciating, slow-motion extraction. The lobster must pull its entirely soft, gelatinous body out of the rigid mold of its old life. It must drag its eyes, its delicate antennae, its legs, and the massive, meaty bulk of its claws through that single, narrow fissure. It emerges completely pliable, looking like a raw, unformed sculpture still wet from the cast. For the next several hours, and sometimes for days, the lobster is utterly defenseless. It cannot fight. Its claws are like wet paper. It must bury itself deep in the darkest, most inaccessible crevices of the rocks, praying that the scent of its exposed flesh does not draw the attention of a hunting cod, a moray eel, or worse, another, larger lobster willing to engage in cannibalism. Many do not survive the dark, but those that do endure this terrifying vulnerability re-enter the world transformed. Their new shell draws calcium from seawater, hardening into a larger, thicker, more formidable suit of armor. And incredibly, the molt brings a miracle of regeneration. If the lobster lost a leg, an antenna, or even an entire claw in a previous battle, the new appendage begins to regrow, pushing out fresh and whole with a new shell. And it is those claws that define the lobster's reign over the seafloor. They are not merely tools. They are two separate, specialized biological machines fused at the shoulder. They are asymmetrical, carrying entirely different weapons on each arm. One is the cutter or the pincher. It is sleek, highly serrated, in line with fast-twitch muscle fibers. It is designed to strike with lightning speed, slicing through the soft flesh of passing prey or manipulating small objects with surgical precision. The other is the crusher. It is massive, bulbous, and built for sheer catastrophic brute force. Powered by dense, slow-twitch muscles, the crusher claw operates like a hydraulic vise. It is capable of exerting enough pressure to shatter the thick, calcium carbonate shells of clams, mussels, and sea urchins as easily as breaking glass. But the most astonishing fact about these weapons is how they are forged. The assignment of the crusher and the cutter is not predetermined by genetics. It is decided by experience. As a juvenile lobster begins to interact with its environment, whichever claw it favors, whichever claw it uses more frequently to grip and grind in the first few weeks of life, will physically alter its developmental trajectory. The heavy use triggers the muscles to bulk, the chitin to thicken, and the limb to permanently transform into the crusher. The lobster literally builds its own heavy artillery through the act of living. These weapons are essential because the seafloor is not a peaceful kingdom. Lobsters are fiercely, violently territorial. When two rival lobsters meet on the gravel plains, they do not immediately attempt to kill one another. They engage in complex, highly ritualized armored warfare. It is a slow, grinding escalation of dominance. They square off, raising their massive claws like gladiators locking shields. They violently whip their antennae, posturing to make themselves look larger. Then they clash. Claw grinds against claw. They shove, they twist, they wrestle, attempting to flip the opponent or rip a limb from its socket. Yet, the most critical element of this combat is entirely invisible. The lobster has incredibly poor vision. In the dark, murky waters of the North Atlantic, eyes are of little use. Instead, the lobster perceives its battlefield through an overwhelming influx of chemical data. It smells the world, but it does not smell with a nose. It smells with its legs. The tiny hairs covering its walking limbs and antennae are hypersensitive chemoreceptors. During a fight, the lobsters are constantly firing streams of urine at one another from nozzles located right below their eyes. This urine is loaded with pheromones. Through these invisible chemical clouds, they can instantly gauge the size, the aggression level, and the health of their opponent. They can even read the chemical memory of recent victories. A lobster that has recently won a fight carries the scent of dominance, and a smaller rival will often read that chemical signature and retreat before a single blow is struck. They map the battlefield and their enemies before physical contact is even made. When the sun sets, filtering the last pale green light from the water, the true nature of the lobster is revealed. Under the cover of total darkness, they leave their burrows. They are not merely scavengers, waiting for the dead to fall from above. They are methodical, opportunistic marauders. They stalk the darkness, their antennae constantly tasting the water for the scent of a resting fish or an exposed crab. They move over the terrain like tanks rolling through a ruined city, flipping rocks, digging through the silt, snapping up anything careless enough to remain in their path. Once prey is secured in the cutter claw, it is passed to the mouth, where a terrifying set of calcified plates located behind the mandibles physically grinds the food to paste before it even hits the stomach. If they are irritated, or if a predator approaches too closely, they are not silent. They do not have vocal cords, but they use their own armor as an instrument. By rubbing specialized, rigid structures at the base of their antennae against their carapace, they produce a low-frequency, buzzing vibration. It is a mechanical growl, a vibration that travels through the water, vibrating the lateral lines of approaching fish, serving as a final warning before the claws are deployed. As the years pass, the surviving lobster grows larger, its armor thicker, its crusher claw developing the mass of a sledgehammer. And here, the biology of the lobster ventures into the realm of science fiction. Unlike mammals, unlike birds, and unlike the vast majority of life on Earth, the lobster does not appear to age in the traditional sense. They exhibit a biological phenomenon known as negligible senescence. In the cells of humans, the telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of our DNA strands, shorten every time a cell divides. This is the ticking clock of mortality. It is why our skin wrinkles, why our organs fail, why we weaken and die of old age. But the lobster constantly produces an enzyme called telomerase. This enzyme actively repairs and lengthens the telomeres, effectively resetting the biological clock at a cellular level. Their muscles do not degenerate. Their reproductive systems do not fail. A 70-year-old lobster is just as fertile, just as strong, and just as capable of fighting as it was at 20. If isolated from the brutal realities of the ocean, a lobster could theoretically live for over a century. It could grow to monstrous proportions, limited only by the sheer, exhausting caloric energy required to mold a shell the size of a boulder. But the ocean is not a laboratory. Nature rarely permits immortality. The lobster's reality is one of constant, grinding attrition. Parasites burrow beneath their armor. Bacterial shell disease literally rots their exoskeletons while they're still alive. And they are hunted relentlessly by an apex predator that drops baited wire cages from the surface. Today, they face an entirely new, invisible enemy. As the oceans absorb massive amounts of carbon, the water becomes more acidic. This acidification actively dissolves calcium carbonate, making it harder and harder for the lobster to build its armor. The rising temperatures shift their breeding cycles, forcing them into deeper, colder, unfamiliar waters just to survive. Yet, they trudge onward, strip away the myth of the seafood platter, forget the drawn butter and the silver forks. Look at the creature resting in the shadow of a sunken boulder. It is not beautiful in the way a dolphin is beautiful. It does not soar. It does not dazzle. It grips. It wrestles. It endures. In the silent calculus of the deep Atlantic, where strength must be worn on the outside, and where survival is not about outrunning your enemy, but simply outlasting them, the lobster is the ultimate biological triumph. It is ancient. It is methodical. a bruiser in the shadows, fighting a heavy, armored war in the dark, armed with iron jaws and the patience of the immortal. The water here is shallow, bathed in the warm, fragmented light of the late afternoon. This is the transitional zone. It is a quiet frontier where the chaotic architecture of the coral reef tapers off into sweeping, undulating meadows of green seagrass and open sand channels. The current is lazy. The predators here are usually small, and the grazers move with a relaxed, grazing rhythm. It is a peaceful, unassuming stretch of the ocean floor, dappled with dancing shadows. But beneath this sunlit tranquility, a lie is being told. Resting on a patch of crushed coral rubble is a stone. It has the exact pitted texture of dead calcium. It casts the correct shadow. It is perfectly aligned with the visual topography of the seafloor. A tiny, translucent shrimp kicks through the water, landing just inches from the stone, completely unaware. Suddenly, the stone breathes. A slit of an eye opens. The texture of the rock dissolves, washing away like wet paint in the rain. The rough, gray contours smooth out in an instant, replaced by a flashing, pulsing wave of iridescent maroon and bright white. The stone detaches from the bottom, hovering upward. A fringe of delicate, skirt-like fins ripples along the edges of its body. And with silent, invisible burst of water from a hidden siphon, the phantom glides forward. This is a cuttlefish. It is not a fish at all, but a cephalopod, a cousin to the squid and the octopus. And it is, without exaggeration, the most spectacular biological illusionist on planet Earth. In a marine world obsessed with the heavy armor of the lobster or the raw, muscular speed of the shark, the cuttlefish has opted for a completely different evolutionary path. It survives not by overpowering its reality, but by hacking it. It is a creature whose entire existence is based on the absolute mastery of perception. Its body is not just a vessel for survival. It is an ultra-high-definition canvas, capable of rewriting its own physical identity with every passing second. To comprehend the cuttlefish, you must look closely at its skin. It is not merely a covering. It is a profoundly complex, multi-layered optical display, wired directly into the animal's central nervous system. The surface of the cuttlefish is carpeted with millions of microscopic, pigment-filled sacs called chromatophores. Each one of these sacs is tethered to a microscopic ring of radial muscles. When the brain sends a neural impulse, those muscles contract, pulling the sac wide open to reveal a burst of yellow, red, or deep brown. When the muscle relaxes, the sac shrinks to an invisible dot. But that is only the top layer. Just beneath the chromatophores lie the iridophores. These are stacks of ultra-thin reflective plates that do not contain pigment, but rather bounce ambient light, creating shimmering metallic greens, blues, and golds. Deeper still are the leucophores, a base layer of cells that scatter pure white light, acting as the illuminated backdrop for the colors above. And the cuttlefish does not just change color, it changes three-dimensional texture. By pushing fluid into specialized nodes under its skin called papillae, it can instantly sprout spikes, bumps, and ridges, perfectly mimicking the sharp edges of a coral branch or the soft, swaying fronds of seaweed. When a cuttlefish wants to disappear, it doesn't just blend in, it actively renders the environment onto its own flesh. It calculates the ambient light, maps the visual texture of the sand or rock beneath it, and instantly matches it. The camouflage is algorithmic. It is instantaneous. It is flawless. But camouflage is merely the cuttlefish's defense. When it goes on the offensive, the illusion becomes a weapon. The cuttlefish hovers over the seagrass meadow, its eyes locked onto a cluster of juvenile shrimp. The eyes of a cuttlefish are utterly alien. They feature a bizarre, undulating, W-shaped pupil. This strange geometry is not an accident. While the cuttlefish is technically colorblind, lacking the photoreceptors to see the world in red, green, or blue, its eyes are engineered to detect something humans cannot even comprehend: polarized light. It sees the invisible angles of light waves bouncing off the environment in the murky, scattered light of the shallows. This gives a cuttlefish a terrifying visual supremacy. It sees high-definition contrast where other predators see only a blurry green fog. It can spot the transparent outline of a shrimp hiding in grass simply by detecting the way light bends through the prey's translucent shell. Despite having eyes situated on opposite sides of its head, preventing true binocular vision. The cuttlefish calculates depth with pinpoint accuracy. It employs a method called stereopsis. As it stalks the shrimp, the cuttlefish begins to bob its head up and down in a strange, rhythmic dance. It is rapidly comparing the shifting visual frames, building a perfect, three-dimensional targeting map of the space between itself and its prey. It drifts closer. Its body shifts from the mottled green of the seagrass to a slate, sandy gray. Its 8 arms, bunched tightly together, slowly fan open into a crown, exposing the thousands of tiny suckers that line their undersides. Then, the biological theater begins. The cuttlefish stops hiding. It wants the shrimp to see it. A sudden, hypnotic pattern erupts across the mantle of the cuttlefish. Thick, black bands of pigment begin to ripple down its back, flowing in rapid succession from its head to its tail. It looks like a strobe light or a living optical illusion. Scientists call this display the passing cloud. For the shrimp, this strobing, pulsing wave of high-contrast movement is neurologically overwhelming. The prey's tiny nervous system cannot process the visual data. It is paralyzed, hypnotized by the living screen hovering above it. The cuttlefish drifts within striking range. The shrimp does not twitch. Suddenly, from a hidden pouch tucked deep within the center of its 8 arms, 2 specialized feeding tentacles rocket outward. They move with explosive ballistic speed, faster than the human eye can track. The tentacle clubs, armed with toothed suction cups, slam into the hypnotized shrimp, gripping it tight. In a fraction of a second, the tentacles snap back like heavy rubber bands, dragging the prey deep into the crown of arms. Hidden at the center of that crown is a razor-sharp, parrot-like beak, which effortlessly crushes the shrimp's exoskeleton. The meal is over in the blink of an eye. The strobing pattern vanishes. The cuttlefish fades back into the mottled green of the seagrass, returning to a state of absolute invisibility. But the cuttlefish's mastery of deception is not reserved solely for hunting and hiding. It is also the foundation of their most complex social interactions. In the cuttlefish world, the battlefield of mating is entirely a war of espionage and disguise. During the breeding season, males congregate, abandoning their camouflage to display aggressive, high-contrast zebra stripes. These bold patterns are a biological shout, an assertion of dominance and physical strength. The largest, most aggressive males claim the females, guarding them fiercely and attacking any rival that approaches. For a smaller male, a direct physical confrontation with an alpha is a guaranteed loss. But the smaller male does not fight with muscle. He fights with the skin. A small male approaches a guarding alpha and a female, but as he nears, he executes a flawless biological heist. On the side of his body facing the female, he maintains his male patterning, signaling his intent to mate. But on the side of his body facing the alpha male, he completely suppresses his zebra stripes. He smooths his texture and shifts his colors to perfectly mimic the mottled, subdued patterning of a female. He effectively splits his body down the middle. To the aggressive alpha, he looks like just another passive female, drifting into the harem. The alpha male allows him to pass right by. The sneaker male glides in, briefly flashes his true colors to female, successfully mates with her right under the alpha's nose, and then slips away into the reef, reinstating his camouflage before the dominant male ever realizes he has been robbed of his genetic legacy. This level of deception requires a staggering amount of cognitive plasticity. It is not instinct. It is situational awareness. It requires the cuttlefish to understand its environment, evaluate the social dynamic, and physically manipulate its own appearance to exploit the blind spots of another individual. And yet, this is a profound tragedy of the cuttlefish. The brain that powers this incredible intelligence, that computes the polarized light, that renders the 3D camouflage and orchestrates the hypnotic strobing, sits compactly wrapped around the animal's esophagus. It is dense and deeply folded. A massive percentage of its nervous system doesn't even reside in its head. It extends directly into the skin. The cuttlefish's brain is literally painted across its entire body. In laboratories, these creatures navigate complex mazes, solve puzzles to access food, and demonstrate clear, problem-solving memory. But they possess no culture. They have no generational learning. Because almost every cuttlefish on Earth will live for less than 2 years. Their lives are an intense, fleeting spark. They grow rapidly, hunt relentlessly, mate in a frenzy of shifting colors, and then die. The females find secure crevice deep in the coral or rocks, attaching clusters of black, grape-like eggs to the ceiling of the cave. She guards them obsessively, slowly degrading, her magnificent skin losing its luster until she perishes. When her children hatch, they emerge into the ocean as perfect, miniature replicas of their parents. They never meet their mother. They are taught nothing. Yet, the moment they hit the water, their skin begins to pulse. They instantly know how to vanish. The illusion is hardwired into their soul. Despite their brilliance, the cuttlefish lives a precarious existence. They are heavily hunted by dolphins, by sharks, and by large, predatory fish. When their camouflage fails, when the predator gets too close, the cuttlefish has one final trick. It contracts its mantle violently, shooting backward through the water, while simultaneously ejecting a dense, dark cloud of ink. But this is not merely a smokescreen to hide behind. The cuttlefish mixes a melanin ink with thick, biological mucus, creating what is called a pseudomorph, a decoy. The ink cloud holds its shape in the water, perfectly mimicking the size and profile of the cuttlefish itself. The predator strikes a phantom, getting a mouthful of sticky, blinding ink. Furthermore, the ink is laced with chemical compounds that physically paralyze the predator's olfactory receptors. It doesn't just blind the enemy's eyes. It blinds their sense of smell, erasing the cuttlefish from the ocean's chemical radar. By the time the ink dissipates, the real cuttlefish is gone, safely buried in the sand or perfectly rendered into the texture of a nearby sponge. In a world obsessed with the heavy armor of the crustacean or the tearing teeth of the pelagic shark, the cuttlefish writes a completely different narrative of survival. It proves that you do not need to be the strongest to survive. You do not need to be the fastest. You just need to be convincing. The cuttlefish is a ghost in the machine of the reef. It is a creature made of soft tissue and light, a biological screen displaying a constant, brilliant lie. It survives by making its predators look away, by making its prey stare too long, and by convincing the ocean that it was never there to begin with. In the shadows of the shallows, the greatest weapon is not the jaw, it is the imagination. The tropical reef is a theater of perpetual, nervous motion. In the shallow, fractured sunlight, the ocean floor seems to shimmer, alive with the frantic daily business of survival. Crabs tiptoe across the abrasive coral rubble, heavily armored and perpetually defensive. Small, vibrant fish glide in synchronized, flashing waves above the white sand, their lateral lines twitching at every passing shadow. The ecosystem here is loud. It is visual. It is built on the universal language of pursuit and evasion. When a large shadow sweeps overhead, a brief, electric tension ripples through the community. The small fish dart into crevices. The crabs tuck their legs beneath their shells. But as the shadow passes, the tension dissolves. The inhabitants of the reef cautiously emerge, and a chaotic rhythm resumes. To the naked eye, to the passing predator, nothing seems out of place. And yet, tucked beneath a limestone ledge no wider than a discarded coconut shell, a miracle of evolutionary adaptation is waiting, watching, calculating. The octopus is there, though no eye can find it. It is folded into the jagged rock, but its physical location is not the reason it has vanished. It is invisible because its skin is a living, breathing canvas of dynamic deception. The octopus does not merely blend into its background, it physically becomes it. Beneath the surface of its skin lies an optical and mechanical system so advanced that human engineering has yet to fully replicate it. The magic begins with the chromatophores. These are millions of tiny, elastic sacs filled with red, brown, yellow, and black pigments. Each individual sac is tethered to a microscopic array of radial muscles, wired directly into the animal's nervous system. In the span of a single heartbeat, the octopus can flex these muscles, pulling the sacs wide open to flood its skin with color, or relaxing them to shrink the pigment down to an invisible pinpoint. But color alone does not make a rock. Below the chromatophores lie the iridophores and leucophores, specialized layers of cells that reflect and scatter ambient light, like millions of shattered mirrors, granting the animal a shimmering metallic luster or the flat, dead mat of deep ocean sand. And then there is the texture. By forcing fluid into specialized muscular nodes called papillae, the octopus manipulates the physical topography of its flesh. It sprouts jagged horns, rough bumps, and rigid ridges. In an instant, its soft, rubbery skin becomes coarse like brain coral or smooth like sea-polished stone. It is a shape-shifter in the most literal sense of the word. Within a fraction of a second, the predator ceases to be an octopus and becomes a patch of the reef. This absolute mastery of disguise is not a cowardly defense. It is a weapon. As a hunter, the octopus is a paradox. It possesses none of the traditional tools of the apex predator. It has no blinding speed. It has no crushing jaws or heavy, calcified armor. It does not hunt in coordinated packs like the dolphin. Its entire offensive strategy relies on profound patience, terrifying precision, and the element of absolute surprise. A small, silver goby fish darts past a ledge, entirely unaware of the watcher in the stone. The octopus moves, but the movement is imperceptible. It extends a single arm, shifting its position with such fluid, terrifying grace that it does not stir a single grain of sediment on the seafloor. Its bulbous mantle contracts slightly, pressing flatter against the rock, and a pulse of dark pigment ripples across its skin, perfectly mimicking the dancing shadow of a nearby blade of seagrass swaying in the current. It is a ghost inching toward the living. To understand how the octopus executes this flawless ambush, one must understand its mind, and its mind is entirely alien to the human experience. The octopus possesses a massive brain. Some species boast up to 500 million neurons, a staggering number for an invertebrate. But unlike mammals, whose intelligence is locked inside a central skull, the octopus's nervous system is radically decentralized. Over half of those 500 million neurons do not reside in its head. They are distributed throughout its 8 limbs. Each arm is, for all intents and purposes, a separate, thinking entity. They operate as semi-autonomous scouts. The arms can problem solve, make decisions, and react to their environment completely independent of the central brain. If an arm is severed, it will continue to crawl, react to pain, and even attempt to capture food and pass it to a mouth that is no longer there. Furthermore, these arms are packed with hundreds of specialized suckers, each one equipped with independent neural circuits. They possess the ability to grip with incredible strength, but more importantly, they are aligned with millions of chemoreceptors. The octopus does not just feel its environment, it tastes it through touch. When an arm slides across the reef, it is chemically profiling everything it brushes against. It knows the exact biochemical signature of the prey hiding in the dark. This distributed, decentralized intelligence is what makes the octopus so mesmerizing and so completely unpredictable. In laboratory settings, they have become legendary for their cognitive plasticity. They have unscrewed the lids of child-proof jars from the inside to get at food. They have memorized the patrol routes of security guards to sneak out of their tanks, cross the floor, eat fish from neighboring aquariums, and return before dawn. They can recognize individual human faces, spraying water at researchers they dislike and greeting those who feed them. But in the wild, this profound intelligence is not used for puzzle solving or play. It is a brutally pragmatic tool for survival in an ocean filled with larger, faster, and hungrier executioners. The goby fish hovers just an inch too close to the ledge. When the strike comes, the illusion of the rock is violently shattered. The octopus lunges. It does not bite immediately. Instead, its 8 arms explode outward like a web of pure muscle and suction. An umbrella of webbing between the upper arms flares open, creating a dark, suffocating canopy that drops over the fish. The goby is enveloped in total darkness before it even registers the need to dart away. Trapped beneath the canopy, the true lethality of the octopus is revealed. Tucked deep within the center of its arms is a weapon that contrasts sharply with its soft body, a hard, razor-sharp beak, structurally identical to that of a parrot. The beak pierces the fish, but it is not the bite that kills. The octopus injects a highly potent venom into the wound. This toxic saliva acts rapidly, paralyzing the prey's nervous system and instantly initiating the process of digestion, dissolving the flesh from the inside out before the meal is even fully swallowed. Then, as quickly as it materialized, the predator vanishes. A large moray eel, drawn by the sudden flurry of movement and the scent of the kill, slithers rapidly around the corner of the reef. The octopus is immediately outmatched in a physical fight. It has no bones. It has no shell. Its soft, protein-rich body is an extreme liability, a highly coveted prize for every shark, eel, and grouper in the vicinity. It does not fight. It executes a flawless tactical retreat. The octopus violently contracts the muscles of its mantle, forcing a jet of water out of its siphon, rocketing backward into the water column. Simultaneously, it releases a dense, billowing cloud of ink, but this is not a panic response, and it is not merely a smoke screen. The ink of an octopus is a carefully orchestrated weapon of misdirection, composed of melanin and thick biological mucus. The ink hangs in the water, holding its shape. It creates a pseudomorph, a physical decoy that mimics the exact size and profile of the octopus itself. The moray eel strikes the dark cloud, getting a mouthful of sticky, blinding fluid. Moreover, the ink is laced with chemical compounds, specifically tyrosinase, which actively blinds a predator's sense of smell. It clogs the eel's olfactory receptors, temporarily erasing the octopus from the ocean's chemical radar. While the eel thrashes in the dark, confused and chemically blinded, the real octopus has already reached a limestone wall. Because it possesses zero bones, its only hard part being the beak, it can compress its entire, sprawling body into a space no wider than a large coin. It pours itself like liquid into a tiny, jagged fissure in the rock, pulling its arms in behind it. Within moments, its skin pulses, the color shifts, the texture hardens. The reef looks exactly as it did 5 minutes ago. But now, one goby is missing, one eel is confused, and the stone is slightly fuller. Yet, for all its unparalleled brilliance, for all its shape-shifting magic and venomous strikes, the life of the octopus is defined by a profound, heartbreaking tragedy. Their existence is an intense, brilliantly burning spark that is extinguished almost as soon as it begins. Most species of octopus will live for less than 2 years. Their reproduction is a dangerous, often fatal affair. When a male approaches a female, he does so with extreme caution. The female is often larger, and she is a ruthless, cannibalistic hunter. He extends a specialized, elongated arm called the hectocotylus, gently transferring a packet of sperm to her mantle from a safe distance. If she is hungry or simply aggressive, she may attack. In many species, the male will sever his own mating arm, leaving it twitching with the female as a distraction while he flees for his life. Even if he survived the encounter, his biological clock is expiring. He will undergo rapid senescence, a sudden programmed cellular death, and perish shortly after, his soft body drifting down to the scavengers of the seafloor. The fate of the mother is even more absolute. She finds a deep hidden cave. She seals herself inside and lays thousands of tiny translucent eggs, weaving them into beautiful cascading braids that she hangs from the rocky ceiling. For the next several months, she will not leave them. She will not hunt. She will not eat. She spends every waking moment gently blowing currents of water over the eggs to keep them oxygenated and free of algae. She protects them from crabs and scavengers with the last reserves of her fading strength. As the weeks pass, she slowly starves. Her brilliant, shape-shifting skin loses its color, turning a pale, ghostly white. Her muscles atrophy. She literally consumes her own body to sustain the energy needed to guard her unborn children. When the eggs finally hatch, erupting into thousands of microscopic, perfect replicas of their parents, they drift out of the cave and up into the ocean currents. They will never know her, and as they leave, she breathes her last, dying alone in the dark. This incredibly short, violently terminal life cycle makes the intelligence of the octopus one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in evolutionary biology. Why would nature invest so much metabolic energy into building a massive 500 million neuron supercomputer for a creature that will die in 18 months? They have no opportunity for generational learning. There is no elder octopus to teach the young how to hunt, or which sharks to avoid, or how to unscrew the shell of a clam. Every single octopus is born an orphan. They must figure out the entirety of the universe, and their place within it, completely from scratch. Some biologists theorize that it is the very complexity of their environment that demands this rapid, disposable genius. The chaotic, three-dimensional maze of the coral reef, combined with total lack of physical armor, means an octopus cannot rely on slow, deeply ingrained instincts. It must be able to think, adapt, and invent new strategies on the fly. Its intelligence was not selected for building culture. It was selected to keep a soft-bodied creature alive in a world of teeth and armor, in an environment that never, ever gives you a second chance. Even in the freezing, nutrient-rich waters of the North Pacific, where the giant Pacific octopus grows to monstrous proportions, boasting an arm span of over 30 feet and weighing hundreds of pounds, the tragic arc remains exactly the same. They live slightly longer, perhaps 3 to 5 years, but their end is identical: solitary, clever, resourceful, and then gone. No songs are sung for them. No pods mourn their passing. But in every coral crevice, in every kelp forest and rocky outcrop, another microscopic juvenile falls from the current. It touches a stone. It tests its arms. It shifts its skin, painting itself into background, and disappears. The camouflage is the first thing we notice, but what truly defined the octopus is the brilliant, lonely mind behind the illusion. In an ocean dominated by the heavily armored, the blindingly fast, and the pack hunters, this soft, silent invertebrate has carved out a throne entirely its own. It rules not through force, but through the absolute mastery of deception. It proves that you do not need a shell to survive the deep. You just need to become the one thing your enemy cannot see. Far below the photic zone, where the fierce, blinding energy of the sun gives way to the eternal twilight of the ocean floor, the rhythm of life undergoes a profound deceleration. This is the benthic realm. It is not a place of dazzling coral cities or glittering, chaotic schools of pelagic fish. It is a muted, desolate expanse of gray and brown, a seemingly endless carpet of fine silt, crushed shell fragments, and the slow drifting remains of the world above. Down here, there is no need for speed. The currents roll with a heavy, lethargic breath, gently disturbing the sediment, exposing the faint, winding trails of creatures that do not hunt, but rather sift. And resting at the end of one of those long, meandering trails, draped over a mound of sand like a discarded, waterlogged sponge, is a creature that defies every conventional metric of survival. It does not possess the armor of the lobster. It lacks the venomous fangs of the sea snake. It cannot outswim a predator, and it cannot camouflage itself with the high-definition brilliance of a cuttlefish. It is little more than a fleshy, tubular sac lying exposed on the open sand. This is the sea cucumber, and at first glance, it appears to be the ocean's ultimate victim, a soft, sluggish, defenseless lump of protein, doomed to be consumed by the first passing crab or bottom-dwelling shark. But the deep ocean does not tolerate the defenseless. If a creature exists in this unforgiving environment, it is because it holds a secret. And the sea cucumber's secret is a terrifying mastery of chemical warfare, biological alchemy, and a willingness to commit acts of physical sacrifice so grotesque they border on the alien. Watch it move, and you will see that it does not swim. It ripples. Beneath its leathery, unassuming skin, thousands of microscopic, fluid-filled hydraulic tubes press against the sand. They operate in a cascading, rhythmic wave, functioning as a living, biological conveyor belt that slowly pushes the animal forward, inch by grueling inch. At its front end, a ring of highly modified, branching tentacles extends outward like a delicate, fleshy flower. These feeding arms constantly, methodically sweep the seafloor, scooping up raw sand and pulling it directly into its mouth. It is eating dirt, but in doing so, it is performing one of the most vital acts of ecological engineering on the planet. The sea cucumber is a great recycler of the abyss. As it passes the sand through its elongated digestive tract, it strips out the microscopic detritus, the decaying organic matter, and the bacteria that have settled on the bottom. It absorbs the dead and excretes clean, reoxygenated sand. It is a living filter. Without the sea cucumber, the ocean floor would rapidly become a toxic, hypoxic wasteland, smothered under a suffocating layer of rotting organic material. By constantly turning over the substrate, they stabilize the pH of the water, preventing dangerous algal blooms and ensuring the survival of entire benthic ecosystems. They are the invisible, tireless janitors of the deep. But janitors are not immune to the violence of the deep sea. A large, predatory crab, heavily armored and armed with crushing pincers, scuttles over the sand dunes. It detects the soft, protein-rich body of the sea cucumber. To the crab, this is a free meal, a defenseless target. It closes the distance rapidly, raising its claws to strike, preparing to rip the soft tissue to shreds. The sea cucumber cannot run, but it does not need to. As the crab's claw makes contact, the sea cucumber violently spasms. The lethargic, sponge-like creature suddenly undergoes a massive, localized muscular contraction, and from its rear, it fires a weapon of profound biological horror. It forcefully ejects a sprawling, tangled mass of bright white filaments directly into the face of the attacker. These are the Cuverian tubules, but they are not mere strings of flesh. The moment they make contact with the seawater, they elongate, multiply in their length, and instantly activate a glue-like biological adhesive. The crab is caught. The more it thrashes, the more the sticky threads entangle its legs, its claws, and its sensory antennae. The adhesive is phenomenally strong, binding the predator in a frustrating, blinding net of rapid-setting biological silk. The crab's hunt is instantly over, replaced entirely by a desperate, exhausting struggle simply to free itself from the mess. Meanwhile, the sea cucumber, completely unfazed by deploying a piece of its own internal anatomy as a weapon, simply continues its slow, hydraulic ripple across the sand, leaving the crab to its misery. Over the next few weeks, the cucumber's body will quietly, miraculously regenerate the lost tubules, reloading its arsenal for the next encounter. But what happens when the sticky net is not enough? What happens when a massive, aggressive predator, perhaps a large bottom-dwelling fish or a hungry sea star, powers through the tubules, determined to consume the cucumber? This is where the sea cucumber executes its ultimate macabre defense. It performs an act of voluntary, catastrophic self-destruction. If the threat is unrelenting, the sea cucumber will deliberately rupture its own body wall. In a shocking display of biological surrender, it will violently vomit its own internal organs out into the water. It expels its respiratory trees, its gonads, and large sections of its digestive tract, leaving them writhing in the sand like a pile of discarded spaghetti. To the predator, this is overwhelming sensory confusion. It is faced with a sudden, chaotic explosion of flesh. But this discarded anatomy is not a free meal. It is a booby trap. The expelled organs are heavily laced with a highly concentrated class of chemical toxins called holothurins. These sapnin-based compounds are devastating to marine predators. They act like biological soap, immediately binding to the gills of the attacking fish, disrupting their cellular membranes and suffocating them on a molecular level. In the enclosed environment of a laboratory aquarium, the stress-induced release of holothurin from a single sea cucumber is potent enough to kill every other fish in the tank. The predator recoils, gagging on the toxic organs, chemically burned and deeply confused. It abandons the hunt, fleeing the toxic cloud. And the sea cucumber, the creature that just ejected its own respiratory and digestive systems, it slowly inches away. By all logic of terrestrial biology, the animal should be dead. But the sea cucumber possesses an anatomy that defies the rules of normal life. Its body wall is primarily composed of mutable collagenous tissue. This means its flesh is not fixed. Under the direct control of its nervous system, it can instantly change the physical stiffness of its body. It can harden to the consistency of rigid plastic to wedge itself into a rock crevice, or it can essentially liquefy its own flesh to squeeze through impossibly small gaps, or to allow for the smooth expulsion of its own guts. And the loss of its organs is nothing but a temporary inconvenience. The sea cucumber is a master of extreme regeneration, sharing a cellular lineage with the famously immortal axolotls and sea stars. Within days, the wound closes. Within a few short weeks, it completely regrows its missing respiratory system, its stomach, and its intestines, emerging entirely whole, as if the apocalyptic trauma had never occurred. It survives by weaponizing its own vulnerability. Where other creatures evolve heavier shells or faster muscles, the sea cucumber evolved the ability to throw away its own life support systems and simply build them again. Yet, for all its miraculous resilience, for all its toxic defenses and regenerative immortality, it is currently losing a war against an enemy it cannot confuse, entangle, or poison. Across the shallow reefs of the Pacific and the deep trenches of Southeast Asia, the sea cucumber is being hunted to the brink of local extinction, not by sharks, not by crabs, but by human beings. In the high-end culinary markets of the world, the dried, leathery body wall of the sea cucumber is known as bêche de mer or trepang. It is considered an elite delicacy and a powerful agent in traditional medicine, believed to cure everything from joint pain to fatigue. The demand is insatiable. Divers scour the ocean floor, harvesting them by the millions, tossing the slow, defenseless creatures into mesh bags. The sea cucumber's defense mechanisms are utterly useless against a diver's glove. They are pulled from the sand, boiled, dried, and shipped across the globe. And as they vanish from the ocean floor, the deep begins to suffocate. Without their tireless, microscopic janitorial work, the sediment turns toxic. The oxygen levels in the sand plummet. The intricate, fragile microhabitats that support juvenile fish and invertebrates begin to collapse. The loss of the sea cucumber triggers a silent, creeping necrosis across the benthic zone. Add to this the invisible threat of a changing climate. As the oceans absorb more carbon dioxide, the water becomes increasingly acidic. This acidification directly interferes with the sea cucumber's ability to develop as larvae, and it disrupts the delicate cellular magic required for their extreme regeneration. But down in the dark, far from the boats and the nets, the survivors continue their slow, endless march. The sea cucumber is the ultimate testament to the weirdness of evolution. It is a creature that operates on a completely different biological philosophy than the rest of the ocean. It does not fight back with aggression. It does not engage in the frantic arms race of speed and teeth. It alters the battlefield itself. It poisons the water. It sacrifices its own body to satisfy the bloodlust of its enemies, and then quietly retreats into the dark to rebuild itself from scratch. In a realm that overwhelmingly rewards the swift and the strong, the sea cucumber stands as a bizarre, squishy monument to the power of patience. It is a reminder that survival in the most extreme environment on Earth does not always belong to the apex predator. Sometimes, survival belongs to the creatures who simply refuse to play by the rules, the ones who soften when they should harden, the ones who surrender when they should fight, the strange, silent chemists of the deep, turning the sand of the ocean floor into the breath of the sea. The rules of survival are brutal, and the true history of our planet is still hidden in the dark. Subscribe to Earth's documentary to uncover the deepest secrets of evolution, extinction, and the untamed life of this extraordinary world.